Yo, what's up, dudes? Off Meta Michael here. There's something that I want to bring up that I don't think is really on the radar of the devs and some of the other people in the PoE community here. And I think this would greatly improve some build diversity for us build crafters. I think right now, the way the game is, it's a bit limiting. And there's some things that make it less fluid to play the build you want to make. So here's the suggestion I'm making. Weapon swap speed. Okay. Now, if you have a spear in one slot and say a quarterstaff in the other, and you want to use two different types of attacks, there's a delay penalty. So like, watch, if I use this quarterstaff, I have to switch first and then he'll do it. And if I want to switch back, he switches back to the spear and does the attack. Now, you can't probably tell just from the way I'm doing it here, but the delay actually makes for an unenjoyable play experience. Now, I know there are weapon swap passives on the tree, like here, here, and here, but if you'll notice, they're south of where the mercenary starts and nowhere else. And now some people might think, or the devs might think, oh, okay, well, we'll put those around here and around here and around here. No, I don't think that's a good change. I think that you should remove weapon swap penalty from the game entirely. I don't think it serves a good purpose. Weapon swap speed is also a modifier that can appear on enchants for gloves, and it can also appear as a modifier on jewels. The other thing is that they did remove jewel sockets in this patch, and I think that reduced the flexibility of build making a bit. So I'd like to see maybe some of those put back in, or perhaps even it's ascendancy related, like you just get a jewel socket for ascending or something like that. I know the Lich has one that gives you a double modifier for your jewel, but just something to make it even more exciting to ascend would be kind of cool. That's just a suggestion. It doesn't mean that has to happen. The weapon swap speed thing, I'm pretty firm on. I think it needs to be removed from the game entirely, and you should have no delay whatsoever for switching abilities and weapons. Okay, so there's that. I think that would make everything a lot better. The other thing that's a bit limiting are stat requirements on gear and skills. I think it's pretty high. Now look, I have 18 dexterity on these gloves and 21 dexterity on this ring here and 15 intelligence on this shield, and then on my belt and helmet have a bunch of strength on them, which just give me some life. It's really just survivability. So those are kind of like, if I get rid of those, I lose a lot of life, and then but I'm not needing them for stats. What I am needing is the dexterity and the intelligence, right? So look, if I take off this pair of gloves, I cannot use my abilities anymore. This pair of gloves has 18 dexterity on them. I can no longer use Whirling Slash or Primal Strikes or Twister, and they're only skill level 14, skill gem level 14. So I'm at 127 dexterity, and I need 133. So these gloves are pretty locked in. Same with this ring. This has 21 dexterity. If I get rid of those, I can't really... If I get rid of this ring, I can't use my abilities. So my recommendation to the devs would be to reduce the gem requirements by 10%, just across the board. In the early game, you won't really notice, because the stats are lower. But as the game progresses and you start getting more supports and more skill gems available to you, you won't feel like you're so locked in for your gear slots for stat requirements. A 10% reduction, I think, would help. If you think of a skill gem that's level 20, I think 205 is about where those lie, at least for like an intelligence-based one is what I recall. And that would just bring it down by like 20, stats, which I think would help. It might free up a slot or a modifier that you have. So those are my suggestions. Get rid of weapon swap speed, reduce the gem requirements by 10%, maybe even the gear requirements by 10% on some things as well. And maybe get a jewel socket in your tree for ascending, or 2 for ascending again. Those are just things that I'd like to see that I think would help some build variety here. So for example, I'm using Frozen Locust to generate chilled ground, and then I'm using these whirling slashes, and the whirling slash picks up the chilled ground, as you can see, and then you can either collapse it to do damage, which is actually a lot. Whirling slash, I did find the prisms, and you get 40% more damage per stage on the collapse. So I was using that. So I would go, I would use something like Shattering Palm, Frozen Locust, generate these, and then I'd jump out and it would all break, and it does a ton of damage, actually. It's kind of cool. Or I could do this, drop the chilled ground that way, and then I can use this ability and pick up all that frost and then throw it, and then accumulate that on my tornadoes, my twisters, which is also pretty cool. And I know there's other ways to get chilled ground, but that's the way I was doing it, and I like how in your face that style is, for melee. So anyway, that's the build I'm playing, and on a lot of my builds, even in the last patch, I was using different weapon types. Now, the last thing, and if you got to this far in the video, let me know, but this last thing would be a very big change that I would like, but I doubt the devs would like it, and I bet I'd be 50-50 split on the players. So here it is. The devs promoted that their game has this great feature of weapon skill set passives, so that when you weapon swap, your tree can have some diverging paths. I kind of think that it might be interesting and create a lot of build variety if they leaned into that and allowed you to get a skill point for both weapon sets, so that you could path 2 totally different directions on the tree and basically make 2 builds in one. So what I'm suggesting is that every time you level, every time you get weapon set skill passives, you get a point for this slot and a point for your other slot. And that would allow you to path one direction with one weapon and another direction with another weapon, if you so choose. I don't know if people would like that change, if they think it would just be too game-breaking, too much power for the player. But I think that if they're going to promote this whole idea that you have weapon swap set passives, maybe lean into it more. And then in conjunction with what I suggested of getting rid of weapon swap speed penalties, you would have crazy amounts of options. I don't know. That last one, I understand that would be a huge change. That would be very big. So I'm open to hearing the criticism about that suggestion. But I am pretty set on some of the other things I said earlier. Let me know what you guys think about that. I think it would be a great change. I hope GGG is listening. If there's anyone that thinks this is a great change, please comment and maybe share it or mention it to your content creators who are bigger, who have more pull. I think it would be a nice thing for the game. Thanks, bye.